In the picturesque region of Lake George, New York, stands Fort William Henry. The fort was occupied by British soldiers who defended the fort from the clutches of the French forces. These soldiers would endure incomparable hardships to ensure the preservation of Lake George as a British-controlled waterway. This is the history of Fort William Henry. The original fort was constructed on the southern end of Lake George in 1755 by Major General William Johnson. When the fort was completed, it was manned by a small force of British soldiers whose job was to protect the fort as a base of operations for English raiding parties. Life at the fort was very cut and dried. The soldiers would get up at 5 a.m. and immediately begin drill. Fatigue duty was also a very important but arduous task.
If the fort wasn't under attack, he'd probably be doing fatigue duties. That'd be going out cutting wood for the fort. These wooden fortresses used tremendous amounts of wood for obvious reasons, repair, and of course you did your heating and cooking with the wood.
The men ate 3,200 calories worth of meal rations a day. They started the day with boiled raw oatmeal, and their main meal, which was in the afternoon, consisted of salt pork, bread, peas, rice, and butter.
The hardtack certainly earned its name. This was what you went out into the field on campaign with. In the British Navy, they used to say it was best eaten in the dark, so you wouldn't see the weevils or the worms crawling through it. In the Navy, too, if you wanted to get the worms off the hardtack, you'd put a dead fish next to your stack of hardtack. And the worms and everything would crawl over onto the dead fish, and then you'd toss the dead fish into the sea.
Alcohol was given to the soldiers every day as a ration. Most soldiers were either given watered-down rum or a beer made with boiled spruce leaves. The beer was said to ward off scurvy, but later findings proved that once the spruce leaves were boiled, all the vitamin C would boil right out of the leaves.
A British soldier was allowed 4 ounces of rum a day for strenuous duty, but he couldn't get it neat or straight. It had to be mixed to 4 parts water. For fear, if they got it straight, they'd save it up in the canteens and go on a toot some night and kill all their officers.
Malnutrition ran rampant in the fort due to lack of fresh vegetables. Smallpox was also a major problem.
When the smallpox ran through the garrison, it wasn't unusual to bury 5 to 8 men a day here from smallpox. That whole parking lot out there is a cemetery.
Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Burton wrote of the unhealthiness of the fort.
About 2,500 men, 500 of them sick. The greatest part of them what they call poorly. They bury from 5 to 8 daily, and officers in proportion. Extremely indolent and dirty to a degree the fort stinks enough to cause infection. They have all their sick in it. The camp is nastier than anything I can conceive. Their necessary houses, kitchens, graves, and places for slaughtering cattle all mix through the encampment.
Fort William Henry saw the burial of 1,000 persons in 2 years of use. Skeletal remains show evidence of poor dental care with abscesses and cavities. Additionally, evidence of chronic tuberculosis, respiratory tract infections, lesions, and nutritional stress was present. The French forces led by General Montcalm arrived during the night of August 2nd, 1757. As the days went on, the French artillery moved closer. The British casualties mounted, and hope of reinforcement continued to dwindle. By the morning of August 8th, the French trenches were a mere 250 yards outside the fort wall. Within the fort, ammunition was low, spirits were lower, and there was little hope. And so, on the morning of August 9th, a flag of truce was visible flying over Fort William Henry. Montcalm offered generous terms, even for the typically gentlemanly terms of the day. The siege of Fort William Henry was over. Almost immediately, Indians